Cole Hartman woke with a blade against his throat. The fire had died, the desert around him still as death. The steel was curved, worn, and held steady by a woman whose eyes didn't blink. 3 figures surrounded him. Apache sisters. He remembered their names from earlier. Ashani, the one with the blade. Mika, quiet and watchful. And Luma, expressionless, her hands stained with earth. Ashani leaned closer. Her voice was calm. You shouldn't have saved us. Now you're ours. Cole tried to move, but the colt that slept beside him every night was gone. So were his boots. Even his horse had vanished into the night without a sound. Hours earlier, he'd pulled these women from a crashed prisoner wagon near Red Rock Hollow. The driver was already dead, his badge buried under broken glass. The sisters were shackled, bleeding, pleading. He hadn't asked questions. He'd used his knife. Now, that same knife was held to his throat. Ashani studied him like she was searching for something beneath his skin. Luma stood behind her, silent, her breath steady in the cold. Mika sat by the embers, drawing slow circles in the dirt. You think you helped us, Ashani said. But you opened something, and now it belongs to you. Cole didn't answer. The air had weight. The desert no longer felt like land. It felt like something watching. Mika turned her head slowly toward him. Her smile was small, almost kind. The fire flared briefly, then died completely. The night swallowed the silence. And Cole understood he wasn't waking into danger. He'd never gone asleep. Cole was half a day from home when he spotted black smoke trailing into the sky above Devil's Spine Ridge. Curious but cautious, he rode closer. What he found was a federal transport wagon, split open like a crushed rib cage, wheels torn off, the frame scorched and steaming. Scattered badges and broken crates littered the dirt. One horse lay dead, its harness still strapped tight. Inside the wreckage, 3 women sat in silence, chained by the ankles, their dresses torn and stained with blood. Their eyes tracked him, but none of them begged. The air was thick with heat and smoke. Cole stepped closer, spotting the marshal slumped beneath a wooden beam, struggling for breath. His mouth barely moved as he forced out a few words. He didn't plead. He warned, don't free them. They ain't prisoners. They're assets. Then he went still. Cole could have turned back. No one knew he'd found them. No law would punish him for walking away. The safer choice was to ride south, let the army clean up their own mess. But something in their faces stopped him. Not desperation. Something heavier. He drew his blade. The steel met the chains with a clean, sharp sound. One by one, the shackles dropped to the dirt. The women stood slowly. Ashani walked past him without a word. Luma brushed the dust from her arms. Mika avoided his gaze. Cole didn't ask who they were. He didn't ask why they were bound like criminals. He just led them away from the wreckage, back toward his camp, and offered them water. By the time the sun slipped behind the rocks, Cole had already sealed his fate. The women said nothing that night, but their silence wasn't gratitude. It was judgment. It was memory. It was the weight of something ancient stepping back into the open. He had cut the chains. Now the story couldn't be undone. As the last light slipped beneath the ridgeline, a quiet unease settled over the camp. The warmth from the fire faded faster than it should have, leaving the air cold and sharp. Cole added more wood, but the flames flickered low, then flared high without warning, as if reacting to something unseen. His horse, normally calm, refused to come near. It stomped and snorted at the edge of the clearing, eyes wide, tugging at the reins. Cole tried to calm it, but the moment he turned his back, it broke free and disappeared into the dark. The 3 sisters remained near the fire. They didn't speak to him, but they whispered to each other in a language he didn't recognize, fluid, rhythmic, and far too deliberate to be casual. Mika crouched by the ashes, carving slow shapes into the dirt with a stick, her focus unbroken. Luma sat cross-legged, her gaze fixed on Cole with quiet intensity, as if reading thoughts he hadn't yet formed. Ashani didn't move at all. She simply watched the fire, as if waiting for it to speak. The wind picked up in short, unnatural bursts. Coyotes circled at a distance, eyes glinting, but none dared make a sound. Even the insects fell silent. Then just past midnight, the ground shifted. Not a quake, not a breeze. Something deeper, like the land itself taking a breath. Cole jerked upright, his heart thudding in his chest. The tremor passed in a heartbeat, but its message was clear. Across the fire, the sisters looked at him with something close to recognition. They didn't appear surprised. They seemed prepared. Cole scanned the horizon, but the night gave nothing back. The stars had dimmed. The silence pressed closer. He realized then that the wagon crash had not been an accident. He had not saved 3 women. He had disturbed something buried, and now it was awake. The sky had just begun to pale when riders approached. Cole was crouched by the fire when he heard hooves crunching over dry stone. He stood slowly, brushing dust from his palms as Sheriff Briggs and 4 deputies rode into the camp. The rifles weren't drawn in warning. They were aimed. Briggs dismounted with practiced calm, the weight of authority resting heavy on his shoulders. His coat was dusty, the tin star on his chest catching the rising light. He scanned the camp with narrowed eyes, gaze landing on the sisters standing behind Cole, still and watchful. "Step aside, Hartman," Briggs said, his voice even. "Those 3 don't belong to you." Cole didn't blink. He folded his arms, blocking the view, answering with a quiet calm of his own. "Ain't seen anyone but my own fire all night." Briggs stepped forward, eyes hard. "Lying doesn't suit you. You know what they are. You know why we're here." Cole said nothing. The deputies shifted in their saddles, uneasy. One of them muttered something about rope. Briggs ignored it, eyes locked on the man in front of him. "You're protecting witches, Cole. You think that makes you righteous? It makes you blind. Men like you, they turn into what they defend." Still, Cole didn't move. The sisters remained behind him, silent, unmoving, offering no expression, no plea, no fear. The fire crackled, but the air between them felt brittle. One word could snap it. After a long moment, Briggs stepped back. He holstered his rifle, but the threat lingered in his stare. "We'll be back with orders. And fire, if that's what it takes." They turned and rode off without another word. Dust rose in their wake. Cole remained still until the sound of hooves faded. His decision was no longer an act of mercy. It had become defiance, and there was no path back. Night settled deep across the ridge, and the fire cast long shadows that swayed like restless spirits. Cole sat apart from the sisters, sharpening a knife he suddenly wished he didn't need. The silence between them felt heavier than the darkness itself. He could sense their eyes on him, measuring his presence, waiting for something he couldn't yet name. Ashani stepped forward and unfolded a small bundle she had carried since the crash. The cloth was stiff with oil and dust, wrapped tightly as if to conceal something dangerous. She placed it in Cole's hands without speaking. Her expression carried no hint of trust or fear, only inevitability. Cole hesitated before peeling back the layers. Inside was a military document, stamped with faded ink that still carried authority. The words struck him harder than any bullet he had ever faced. Fort Redstone Project Classified Subjects. Firekeeper Sisters, he read further, his pulse quickening with every line. The report listed 3 Apache women taken from their people and subjected to experiments intended to test the limits of the human spirit. It spoke of ritual endurance, unnatural resistance, and the ability to withstand elements that should have killed them. One detail froze his breath. The subjects showed no signs of aging. Cole looked up slowly. The stories told around campfires about restless spirits and women who walked untouched through winter storms suddenly had shape and names. Ashani met his gaze without flinching. Mika watched from the shadows, her eyes reflecting the flames. Luma stood behind them, her presence quiet yet unyielding. "You're not running from the law," Cole said. "You're running from something that should have never started." Ashani placed her hand against his chest, her touch firm, neither gentle nor threatening. Her voice carried the weight of years he could not fathom. "We are not a mistake. We are what remains when men try to command what they do not understand." The truth changed everything. Cole no longer stood near 3 rescued women. He stood before the result of a secret the frontier was never meant to hold. The document opened a door Cole never knew existed. He had grown up hearing tales of raids, treaties broken, and battles that left scars on the land, but none of those stories mentioned what happened after the dust settled. The paper in his hands revealed a chapter erased before it could be spoken aloud. When the Apache Wars ended, the Union Army did not simply retreat. They sought power in places they did not understand. Rumors had spread of women who could call wind during drought, calm wild horses without touch, or walk away from lightning strikes as if they were nothing more than sparks in the dirt. Such stories were dismissed as superstition by most, yet officials with ambition saw opportunity. These women were taken under the guise of peace talks and placed in facilities hidden from the public, far from their homeland. There, soldiers and scientists probed for abilities they could neither define nor control. They believed strength could be extracted like or from the ground and turned into something obedient. The Firekeeper Sisters, as the reports called them, were considered the greatest discovery of the era, but power that belongs to the earth does not yield to human hands. Cole read descriptions of trials meant to break the will of the captives, tests designed to reveal secrets older than forts or flags. None of the records stated how the experiments ended. They only confirmed that attempts to command the sisters failed. What unsettled him most was the tone of the reports. The fear within the words did not come from danger the sisters posed. It came from what soldiers saw and could not comprehend. Governments rose and fell. New commanders replaced old ones. Yet every administration issued the same directive: locate the Firekeeper Sisters and eliminate any trace of them. The army did not want to harness their power anymore. It wanted silence. Not justice. Not closure. Erasure. Cole folded the document slowly. He finally understood why Sheriff Briggs rode with such urgency. The sisters were not escaping punishment. They were escaping history. The tension that night didn't come from the fire, the wind, or the threat of pursuit. It came from within the camp. Cole sensed it before he heard it. The silence between the sisters had shifted, not outwardly, but like a rope pulled too tight, fraying from the inside. Mika stood near the edge of the clearing, arms crossed, jaw clenched. She watched Cole as if waiting for him to falter. When Luma approached her, the words came out in a low, sharp whisper. "He will betray us. They always do." Her voice wasn't filled with fear. It was shaped by memory. Cole couldn't hear Luma's full reply, but her tone was calm, firm in contrast. He cut the chains without asking who we were. That matters. The sisters stood close, but not together. Something ran between them, something old and unfinished. Cole wasn't sure if it was pain, distrust, or some unspoken bond on the edge of breaking. Ashani sat alone near the fire. She didn't join their argument, didn't speak a word. Her face gave nothing away. She looked past the flames as if watching a path only she could see. Cole thought she might intervene, but she didn't. Perhaps she'd seen this moment before. Perhaps it was always meant to happen. As he listened from a distance, Cole understood something that hadn't crossed his mind until now. The sisters weren't simply hiding from the world outside. They were keeping distance from one another. The bond that held them was strong, but something buried beneath it pulled in different directions. He had taken them in thinking they were a single force, bound by survival. But survival leaves scars, and those scars rarely heal the same way. This wasn't just a flight from soldiers or secrets. It was a flight from choices they couldn't agree on, and Cole had stepped right into the middle of it. While the sisters gathered herbs at the edge of the canyon, Cole remained by the fire. Something about the ashes caught his eye, a slight bulge beneath the blackened dust. He reached in, brushing carefully until his fingers hit something solid. Wrapped in charred cloth, bound by cracked leather, was an old journal nearly swallowed by time. The cover had nearly turned to pulp, but inside, the pages still held ink. He turned carefully to the first readable entry. The date stopped him. 1871, Fort Redstone. The writing was rushed, uneven. The words belonged to someone who had seen too much in too little time. They walked through flame without burning. They spoke to storms. Command insists they be subdued, not killed. We are not scientists. We are trespassers. God forgive us. The final lines were nearly unreadable, smudged in a dark streak that had soaked deep into the paper. If they ever wake, the land wakes with them. Cole read the passage twice, the meaning settling like stone in his chest. The journal confirmed everything the sisters had not said. It exposed the truth behind their silence. These weren't legends. They were lived moments recorded by someone who hadn't survived long enough to tell them out loud. He lowered the book slowly. The sound of the wind had faded. The camp felt still in a way that didn't feel natural. As he turned to speak, he froze. The sisters stood behind him. He hadn't heard their footsteps, hadn't felt their presence shift. One moment he was alone. The next they were watching him, saying nothing. Ashani's eyes dropped to the journal in his hands, but she didn't move to take it. Mika's face held no surprise. Luma seemed almost calm, as if the moment had been waiting to happen. The fire crackled once. Then it went silent. Cole understood the journal wasn't lost by accident. It was left for him to find. The air shifted before the noise reached them. A low hum vibrated through the ground like thunder buried beneath the soil. Cole stepped away from the fire, eyes scanning the ridgeline. Then came the light. Dozens of lanterns glowing like distant stars, stretching across the hills in a jagged line. Figures emerged from the dark, 50 or more, mounted and armed. The glint of polished buckles and iron barrels confirmed what Cole feared. These weren't local lawmen. The insignias stitched to their coats belonged to the United States Army. At the center of the formation rolled a wagon fitted with a mounted Gatling gun, its barrel already turning slow, like a warning. A tall officer rode to the front. His voice rang out across the open space, commanding and cold. Ashani, Mika, Luma, surrender the rancher. Do it now, and we may still show mercy. The fire hissed as it caught a gust of wind. Cole stood rooted in place, hands down, mouth dry. Ashani stepped forward, calm as the desert before storm. She looked up at the captain, then turned her gaze to Cole. This was never about hiding, she said quietly. They always knew how to find us. She moved beside him, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating off her skin. Her voice dropped lower. They didn't come for us tonight. They came because of you. Cole felt the weight of her words settle deep in his chest. He hadn't brought salvation. He'd brought attention. He had lit a signal fire without knowing it. Ashani's eyes held no blame, only understanding. She had seen this before, maybe in visions, maybe in memory. In the hills above them, the soldiers waited for a command. In a valley below, something older than steel and bullets stirred. Cole realized too late that he wasn't just part of the story now. He had become the reason it had restarted. As the soldiers tightened their formation, Cole stepped back toward his horse, moving slowly, deliberately. His hands didn't go to his weapon. They went to the saddlebag, tucked beneath the worn leather flap he rarely touched. From the bottom, wrapped in faded cloth, he pulled out an object few had ever seen. A pendant, carved from bone, smooth with age, marked with symbols that had no origin in any book he knew. It had belonged to his father, passed down with no story. Only the instruction to keep it close and never sell it, not for coin or land. Until now, Cole had thought it nothing more than a relic, strange but harmless. He turned and held it in his palm, letting the firelight catch its edges. The moment Ashani saw it, something in her posture changed. Her expression, so often unreadable, cracked with recognition. She stepped back, not in fear but reverence. "You carry the mark of the first watcher," she said. Her voice was low, but the words carried across the camp. "That symbol is older than memory. You weren't supposed to pass us by. You were meant to find us." Luma moved beside her. Mika, usually withdrawn, stepped forward for the first time without hesitation. All three stared at the pendant like it held more truth than any weapon ever could. Above them, the captain barked new orders. Soldiers raised their rifles. The Gatling gun shifted, but the wind changed, fast, sharp, pushing dust against the barrels. The torches along the ridge flickered, one by one, then extinguished completely. The valley fell into unnatural stillness. Cole didn't speak. He didn't need to. The moment marked a shift, not just in presence, but in purpose. He was no longer the outsider who'd stumbled into something forbidden. The pendant he had kept out of habit had revealed something neither side could deny. Ashani lowered her head slightly. The soldiers hesitated. Whatever power had chased the sisters across decades now pulsed through the man who had unknowingly held its key all along. The captain lifted his hand, ready to signal the barrage. Soldiers adjusted their rifles. The creak of iron gears turning inside the Gatling gun broke the silence. The moment felt suspended, stretched between warning and war. Cole stepped forward. His voice was steady, though the weight of the words had not been tested. He spoke a name, not one given but one buried. A name he had seen once in the brittle journal, barely legible, almost lost beneath dried blood and age. It wasn't a command. It was a recognition. Ashani froze. The wind rose without warning. It gathered speed, bending branches, swirling dust into a funnel that split the fire apart. Horses panicked, kicking violently. One threw its rider and bolted. Lanterns shattered against stone. The sky seemed to draw breath. Ashani fell to her knees, not from weakness, but something deeper. Her hands touched the ground as if greeting it. Her eyes closed, and when they opened again, they held none of the guarded caution Cole had seen before. Only clarity. "You choose us," she whispered, voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. Cole met her gaze and answered without hesitation. "Then I choose what follows." The earth shifted beneath them, not a tremor, but a pulse, as if the land itself acknowledged the choice. The wind no longer felt random. It moved with intention, like something ancient had been stirred. The soldiers began to retreat. One shouted for order. Another fired blindly into the storm, but the bullet vanished into the dark. The captain tried to raise his voice again, but whatever authority he carried had been swallowed by something larger. They came seeking submission. They left chased by a force that didn't answer to chains or commands. Cole remained still, grounded between past and present, no longer bystander or shield. He had spoken the name, crossed the threshold, and in doing so, unleashed what could never be captured again. The first light of morning spilled across the dry plains, casting long shadows across the ranch. The storm had passed, but its presence lingered in the stillness. The sky was clear, yet the air carried a sense of something permanent having shifted. Cole stood near the edge of his land, the grass damp beneath his boots. The sisters approached in silence, not as fugitives, but as figures stepping into a new chapter. They no longer moved with caution. There was no more need for it. Luma stepped forward and placed something in his palm. It was the pendant, smooth bone, etched with symbols he still couldn't translate, but now understood. It no longer felt like an heirloom. It felt like a key that had finally been turned. "You are bound to us," she said. "Not by blood, by choice." Ashani stood beside her, gaze steady, not demanding but acknowledging. Mika remained a step behind, her eyes softer now, not because she trusted easily, but because the choice had been made. Cole closed his fingers around the pendant. No words passed between them beyond what had already been said. There was no ceremony, no ritual, only acceptance. Behind them, the ranch remained untouched. The cattle moved through the field. The fences stood. The house waited. But nothing felt the same. The land was still his, but ownership had changed meaning. He wasn't just a man who cut chains or guarded fire. He had become something else entirely, a witness, a link, a bridge between what was hidden and what had endured. Secrets had been buried in this soil long before barbed wire divided it. Now, he carried one of them, not to control, but to protect. And the sisters walked away without looking back. They knew he would understand. Time moved on, but the land remembered. As the seasons turned, rumors began to grow like wild sage along the borders of Cole Hartman's property. Travelers passing near the old trails spoke in hushed tones about strange shifts in wind, uncanny silence, and the feeling of being watched without malice, only warning. Some claimed the ranch had become untouchable. Men who arrived with bad intentions left shaken or never returned at all. A few were found wandering miles away, disoriented, unable to explain how they'd gotten so far off trail. Others never spoke of it again. Locals whispered about the wind, They said it carried words that didn't belong to English, spoken low and layered with something that felt older than time. Those who listened too closely felt a presence move through the brush behind them. Never violent, never seen, just there. Riders swore they spotted 3 women moving across the high ridges at dusk, their silhouettes outlined in firelight. Sometimes a man rode with them, tall and silent, face hidden beneath a hat. No one could agree on what he looked like, only that he never seemed to change. Official records became harder to trace. Cole Hartman's name vanished from the census. Tax logs showed no activity. The land remained unclaimed. It was clear no one dared cross its fences. Even surveyors gave the property a wide berth. In towns miles away, the story took on a life of its own. Some called it superstition, others called it protection. But those who knew the land, who'd ridden through the desert long enough to trust its instincts, understood the truth without needing to speak it. Cole didn't disappear. He stepped beyond what paper and ink could define. The man who once ran cattle now guarded something greater than livestock. He had become part of a story not written in ledgers, but carried in wind, soil, and silence. If this story unsettled you, it was only the beginning. What Cole uncovered beneath Fort Redstone was not just classified. It was buried by force, erased from maps, and struck from military records. Those who knew it existed are either gone or too afraid to speak. The truth wasn't meant to survive, but it did, and now it's ready to surface. The canyon hasn't closed yet, but it will. Click now before they seal it again.